Hello sim racers and welcome back to the Fixed Setup Oval Racing Guide. Bristol Dirt is now in the rearview mirror, and I imagine for a large percentage of you, that's very good news. Of course, I don't need to speculate how you might feel. I put up a weekly poll on my community tab, and I ask you to tell me what you think of that week's activities. And of course, last week, well, I put up a poll to see what you thought of dirt racing, and needless to say, you made your feelings pretty well known. Speaking of dirt racing at Bristol, I myself dove into it a little bit. I did 3 C-fixed races, and honestly, I had some fun. I had some pretty good results as well, but at the end of the day, I really just disliked how, no matter what lap we were on, how slicked off the track was, all I had to do was hold the throttle down and crank the wheel to the left. And it just was not, I don't know, it just didn't feel good. So despite good results, I didn't really like the overall experience. I did run a few A-fixed. I ran a spur of the moment NIS race that ended up having like 14 cautions for 70 of 125 laps. Really not good. But, you know, we still did it and we move on. It didn't impact my oval license or safety rating, so did I really care? No, and that's why I told you all last week, don't worry about what happens, it's just kind of a freebie. This week, if you don't like short track racing or goofy super speedway racing, well, I got some bad news for you because that's pretty much all we've got. Also, stay tuned until the end of the video for a special announcement about something very cool that I'll be doing this coming weekend that involves real life racing. All right, here we go. Week 3, you ready? Let's get to it. Before we begin, please take a moment to listen to my disclaimers. As with any skill-based activity, your mileage may vary with the information shared in this video. Sim racing requires individual effort in order to improve, and simply watching a video will not make you a better sim racer. Tips and tricks are not one size fits all, and you may need to adjust based on your skill level. These episodes are recorded before the new week begins, so the guided qualifying lap should not be viewed as the gold standard for the best lap time possible. Treat this information simply as a starting point for your own practice routine. Any analysis or commentary that I provide comes from my own experience on iRacing and may not always directly translate to what happens to you. I'm human, I make mistakes, and I can be wrong. And sometimes, iRacing likes to change things in the middle of the week. I try my best to provide the most accurate information ahead of time, but if I do make a mistake or leave something out, or iRacing changes something that invalidates something I've already said, you have my apology in advance. Up first, the ARCA Menard Series goes to Lanier National Speedway for a 60-lap brawl that takes place at 2:40 p.m. in Sim. Oh boy. In my qualifying runs, it reminded me a lot of the super late model from last week because I found that getting to full throttle, especially on the front stretch, is a really tricky thing to do, and it might actually cost you more time than gain you. It's incredibly easy to miss the entry to turn 1, and if you miss it, you're probably either spinning out or at the very least having a terrible lap time. For the qualifying run that you're about to see, I used a 12-to-1 steering ratio and 66% brake bias. My lap time was a 14.312, but I feel like I left a good amount of time on the table. ARCA at Lanier is always a bloodbath. Chaos, wrecks, no caution flags, angry drivers. It's hard to recommend to anyone who's looking to either gain I rating or safety rating this week. But if you do dive into it, I salute your bravery. I'll probably check out some of these races, but I'll be doing it from the safety of my alt account because the entertainment factor is going to be there. I just don't want to risk any of my own hard-earned I rating or safety rating on my main account, you know? The C-Class Street Stocks are at North Wilkesboro Speedway for a 50-lap race that takes place at noon in Sim. I think this combo might be the most fun to drive of the entire week, relatively speaking. I really enjoyed the laps that I made during my qualifying and practice runs. I could see the racing here being somewhat decent. Somewhat. Hitting the line for turn 1 is absolutely essential to snapping off a good qualifying time. This car loves to understeer on corner entry, so if you're carrying too much speed, you will never hit that line correctly. For the qualifying run that you're about to see, I used the default 10-to-1 steering ratio and the default brake bias. My lap time was a 20.156. Being patient when getting back to the throttle will be very important here at North Wilkesboro, and I imagine that your passing opportunities will come simply from others overdriving their car. If you're in traffic, give yourself some space to operate, but protect the bottom as much as you can. The last thing that you're going to want is somebody throwing it up the inside and then dooring you up the racetrack because they can't keep the bottom. If you're out front or by yourself, keep your momentum up by arcing into and out of the corners to minimize scrubbing off speed. The street stock is really slow to accelerate, so the more speed that you can carry off of the corners, the better. The super late models go to Martinsville Speedway for a 60-lap race that takes place at 7:40 p.m. in Sim. Unlike last week's race at Lanier, you can fully unleash the power of these incredible race cars at this paperclip-shaped racetrack, and boy oh boy, these things are an absolute blast to drive here. They really feel at home at Martinsville. It's incredible to launch out of the corners, blast down the straightaways, and then stand on those powerful brakes to make the next corner. It's truly incredible when you get it right. For this qualifying run, I used a 12-to-1 steering ratio and left the brake bias at its default value. The lap time here was a 19.571. Anytime a race at Martinsville comes up in iRacing, it usually turns into a caution fest, and it's hard to imagine this being much different. I ran one super late model race at Lanier last week, and it was a terrible experience. Absolutely awful. Toxic voice chat, a complete waste of time, got wrecked so many times by people, just having no fundamental appreciation for this type of race car, the amount of power it generates, or just good short track racecraft in general. I really hope this week is different. I think the overall health of this particular series is definitely at risk if the racing continues to be poor week after week. Good luck out there. The NASCAR Legends series joins the street stocks at North Wilkesboro Speedway. They go for 120 laps, and the race takes place at noon in Sim. Straight up, I did not like how this car drove during my practice session, and I had a difficult time even just running smooth, consistent laps at less than full pace. I don't know what it was. The car just feels notchy, especially on corner entry, and I kept spinning out despite driving carefully. It's really hard to explain. You'll have to find out when you jump into it yourself, but I don't know. I'd just go into the corner and the front end felt like it was rotating, and then it would just, I don't know, just grab and go. Again, notchy is the best way I could describe it. I don't know. Let me know in the comments what you feel. It might just be a me thing, but I was not very fond of my experience with this car at this track. For the qualifying run, default steering ratio of 14-to-1, default brake bias. My lap time was an 18.956. Given my struggles and overall dissatisfaction with this combo this week, it's hard for me to gauge what a race may be like, but I came into this expecting something similar to what we had at Nashville Fairgrounds last season, a combo that I really enjoyed a lot. Unfortunately, the change that iRacing made to this car for Season 2 do not replicate what I experienced at Nashville, and this just isn't something I'm going to be engaging with this week. If you do, you'll probably be well served to back up the corners and be smooth with the steering wheel. Survival for 120 laps is probably going to be the name of the game. With Easter weekend coming up, NASCAR is taking its first break of the season, and because of that, iRacing had to get a little creative with what to put on the schedule for its NASCAR series. And in their sheer genius, I guess, they decided to go from one giant meme at Bristol Dirt to another giant meme at iRacing Super Speedway. Yes, iRacing Super Speedway. C Fixed goes there for a 23-lap race that takes place at 1:25 p.m. in Sim. Oh boy. This track was added last season, and if you've run on it before, you know what it's all about. Big speed, big banking, and big wrecks. That's the name of the game when it comes to iRacing Super Speedway. How this worked its way into being an official race this week, I have no idea, but just know what you're getting into ahead of time. For my qualifying run, I used this 14-to-1 steering ratio, but you could run 12, you could run 16. I ran all three of them, and I didn't really notice a big difference between my lap times. Go with whatever you feel most comfortable using. My lap time for this run was a 50.350. I wish I had better advice for you than what I'm about to say, but after thinking about it a lot, I really don't. So here's my wisdom. Proceed with caution. Super Speedway weeks are generally a crapshoot as it is, but this track is so unique with its speed and the entire experience that it gives you. It's different than Daytona or Talladega. Netcode is worse at this track than anywhere else, simply because of how fast you're going and how abrupt the transitions are into these steeply banked turns. The bottom is generally the best place to be, but do not touch that apron no matter what. It's so commonplace to see people hit the apron and shoot up the track on corner entry, wiping out anybody who's next to them. Be mindful of where the turn is if you're on the bottom on the straightaways, because if you miss it by an inch and enter in on the apron, or the left side's graze that apron, you're going up the track no matter what you do. Good luck out there if you take this on, but again, proceed with caution. B Fixed heads to Bristol, the asphalt version for some reason, and has an 80-lap race that starts at noon in Sim. It felt so weird to run the asphalt version of this track after doing so much dirt racing on it the past week. I genuinely felt rusty at how to even drive this track. It was weird. Let me know in the comments if you experienced the same thing. After testing both lanes, top and bottom, I can say without a doubt that running the top is still faster. So focus on learning how to do that to put down a good qualifying lap, but also how to have a good race too. For this qualifying run, I used a 10-to-1 steering ratio and 62% brake bias. My time was a 15.449. I wish I could tell you why B Fixed isn't going to Iracing Super Speedway like the other two, but here we are. Iracing. I don't know. Typically, Bristol is a smash and bash type of race where tempers flare and safety ratings burn to the ground, especially with how important it is to run near the wall. If you thought you saw some bad sliders on the dirt version of this track, be prepared for some outrageous asphalt sliders from drivers thinking they can pull it off. Oh my goodness. Throttle patience will be rewarded in the form of not knocking the wall down on corner exit, but expect impatience from drivers behind you, and it's very likely you're gonna get run over from someone just simply driving in way over their head on corner entry. A Fixed follows the trucks to Iracing Super Speedway, getting a 30-lap race that takes place at 1:25 p.m. in Sim. Again, steering ratio did not seem to make as much of a difference in qualifying performance as simply just hitting the right line, so go with whatever you feel most comfortable using. On this run, I used a 12-to-1 steering ratio and ran a 45.547. Everything I said in the C Fixed section applies the same here. Luck will play as big a factor in your outcomes this week as anything if you race at Iracing Super Speedway. However, one thing that I didn't share in C Fixed that it applies here to A Fixed, it's normal to see cars spin their rear tires, get loose, or wreck on restarts at this track because of how banked the front stretch is. It really will catch people off guard, especially if they've never raced here before. Keep an eye out for that. It's entirely possible you will see huge wrecks break out on a restart because somebody breaks rear traction and can't save it, and everybody just piles in. It's a hilarious but awful thing to see. Just be aware of it. Think of like Dover. Restarts at Dover can be pretty tricky because of the banking there. This track, very much the same. There's no NIS race this week! For those of you who stuck around until the end of the video, thank you, and here is your reward, the special announcement. I'll be participating in the Yokohama Sears Pointless 2021 at Sonoma Raceway this weekend. It's an endurance race for $500 cars put on by the people at Lemons Racing. If you've heard of Lemons Racing before, you know what I'm talking about. If you haven't, I recommend checking them out. 24hoursoflemons.com. You see the car in the background images that I'll be driving. I'll have an in-car camera and other content on my Twitch channel throughout the weekend, assuming that it all works. So do be sure to stop on by, see how the team is doing, cheer us on. I'm really excited. I've only seen Sonoma Raceway through video games. Now to see it in real life driving a real race car, pretty cool, man. Can't wait to get going on that. We'll see you this weekend for that. And that'll do it for this week's Fixed Setup Oval Racing Guide. I hope that you enjoyed this episode and found the information to be educational, but most importantly, helpful. And if it was, please help me out by leaving a thumbs up on the video so more sim racers can find this content. If you're new to the channel and want to make sure you never miss an episode, hit that subscribe button right now and turn notifications on. I upload every Monday. Additionally, you can watch my iRacing adventures on my Twitch channel, linked down in the description below. If you want to get in touch with me and stay up to date on the latest channel activity, the best way to do that is to follow me on Twitter, also linked down in the description below. Again, thank you so much for watching this video, and have a great week of racing.